All right, I think we are live now. Okay, out to everyone who has not been to one of these talks yet, welcome. This is the Catamaran virtual reading and lecture sequence, and I am Matt Simmons. I'm the conference manager this year. We were unable to have our normal summer writing conference, as many of you have probably heard, at the beautiful Stevenson campus on 17 Mile Drive. It's been a 7-year tradition for Catamaran to host the conference there, but due to the pandemic, the conference has had to be postponed. But we're looking forward to next year having the conference there once again. The new dates will be July 25th to July 29th, 2021, and you can register for that already on the Catamaran website. But that's a long time for us to wait to connect with the community of poets and writers around Catamaran. So this week we have these talks and readings set up that you can register for all on Crowdcast. So Crowdcast at Catamaran Literary Reader. If you just click the name, you should be able to see all of them and sign up. On Sunday, we had Jane Smiley deliver the keynote. We had poetry yesterday with Zach Rogau, Joe Millar, and Susan Brown. And today we're going to turn to fiction. We have some readings later tonight from Josip Novakovic and Lisa Fugard. And then on Wednesday, we're going to turn to nonfiction with Neil Snydau, Joan Staffen, Charles Hood, and Dan White. And we hope that you will join us for these events and make sure to learn more by, again, clicking on Catamaran Literary Reader, reading the descriptions, and signing up for those as well. But right now, we have Karen Joy Fowler. She is the author of 6 novels and 3 collections of short stories. Her novel, The Jane Austen Book Club, spent 13 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. Her most recent novel, We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves, won the 2014 PEN Faulkner Award for fiction and was shortlisted for the 2014 Man Booker Prize. She has just finished her 7th novel. So, before I hand it off to Karen to dazzle us with the craft advice, I want to explain to you how Crowdcast works a bit. So down at the bottom, you will see a couple things. Number one, you will see buy her books. This is very important. This will lead you to the Catamaran Book Fair, where you can buy signed copies of Karen's books there. And you can also see a little farther down the Ask a Question button. If you click that, you'll be able to ask or suggest a topic, and we're going to get to those after the talk. We should have plenty of time for questions and topics, so don't be shy. Put as many in there as you want, and we'll try and get to all of them. All right, Karen, it is all yours, and I will see you in a little bit.
All right, thank you. This talk sort of grew out of a workshop that I've given a number of times, a workshop that I really love to give, which is called The Problem Child. And the people who are eligible for this workshop are people who are in the middle of a project and have run aground in some way. So they're still committed to the project. They still really want to finish it. And yet, for some reason, they are not actually finishing it. It's always a very small workshop. We spend a lot of time discussing the particular projects that people have brought in. We spend a lot of time trying to determine in each case in a very personalized way where the problem has occurred. And one of the reasons I love doing the workshop version of this is that I am not the only person there to give advice, that it's very much a brain trust kind of situation. And often the best advice does not come from me, but comes from somebody else who is taking the workshop as well. So that's the way it would work in a workshop setting. And what I am going to try to do is a much less personalized version of it today, where I talk about certain issues that seem to come up repeatedly in various projects that people are doing. So this won't be specific to a project, but we'll hopefully talk about some of the problems that many of us share as we try to see some project through from idea to the words, the end, written on the page. Many of the things I'm going to be talking about are things that I struggle with myself, novel to novel, short story to short story. I am a fiction writer, so although in the workshop I do also work with a lot of people who are dealing with memoir, most of my advice today is going to be about fiction and certain strategies I might try if I'm running into trouble with a fiction project. I did, as Matthew just said, I did just finish my 7th novel, and I will tell you that as late or as early as a month ago, I had serious doubts whether I could actually finish it, even though I had already written hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's still the idea of bringing it to its final version still seemed very problematic. And it's out to my workshop now, so it may not be in, it probably definitely is not in its final version, but I hope it's close. A lot of the issues that come up for people are external issues, and they involve the fact that people lead very busy lives, and that they feel a sense of responsibility to many people in their lives. And some people work at jobs where they sit and look at a computer all day long, and so the last thing they want to do when they come home is open a screen again and spend time looking at their own work on it. And there is something I think that is just intrinsically selfish about telling your family and the people around you that you need this time to yourself. And this is a particularly hard thing to feel that you are entitled to before you publish. That, when it's all a very distant kind of dream, to tell the people around you, and more importantly, to believe yourself that this is something that is worth your time doing is, it's a hard case to make. And yet, I really, all I can sort of say in addressing it is that you are allowed to have dreams, and you are allowed to pursue those dreams. When I began writing, I had small children at home, and the busy life that involved, and I did feel often quite conflicted about believing that I was entitled to take this time, and I was entitled to try to make this happen, when there was nothing to suggest that anything good was ever going to come of that. And the case I finally made to myself and to my family, but probably more importantly to myself, was that I needed this to be a happy person, to live a happy life, that if I gave it up, if I persuaded myself that it was not actually going to be worth the time and effort, and that it was very, very likely that nothing would come of it, I would be looking back on a life that I had serious complaints and regrets about. So I tried to remove the whole conversation from the idea that something productive would ever happen, to a place where the conversation was more about what I needed to be a happy person, to be a good member of the family. And as I said, that just sort of the basic principle that that you are entitled to have dreams, and you are entitled to try to do what is necessary to make those dreams come true, whether they come true or not, being a completely separate issue. So in terms of schedules and difficulties of fitting writing into it, that just remains an enormous difficulty for a lot of people, and one I am very sympathetic to. But if you're going to make this happen, work is going to be involved, and sustained work is going to be involved, and you're going to have to find a space where that can take place. My very good friend Pat Murphy gets up at 4 a.m. so that she can do her work prior to going to her job, and I am filled with awe over that. I feel fairly certain that if my only option had been getting up at 4 a.m, I would not have the career that I now have. That there are prices to pay, but 4 a.m is a heavy price to pay. But maybe I would have. Let's pretend I would have, and let's pretend that you will too. As I said, space just has to be found, and it doesn't have to be large amounts of space, although those are generally the most productive. But if you're forced to work in small bits and pieces that you can steal, that can be done. And hopefully you will find a way to do it. I think that most people, when they decide that they want to write, do it because they love doing it, because there's just something about the process that brings them great satisfaction and joy. Again, completely divorced from the other issue of whether anybody is ever going to buy it, anybody is ever going to read it, anybody is ever going to notice the work that you've done. That when you start, you don't really even need that. You do it because you enjoy it, or you wouldn't do it. You would do something else instead. There are many, many, many ways you can spend your time. And I am not a member of the school that writing is all about opening a vein and bleeding on the page. I think I do it because I love to do it. And one of the great surprises to me as my career has progressed is how much of being a writer involves a kind of emotional maintenance. I was completely prepared for the fact that I would have to work at being a better writer and at figuring out better ways to convey what I wanted to convey, and finding ideas and trying to make them happen in ways that communicated what I wanted to communicate. All of that I was prepared for. But I was kind of unprepared for some of the emotional difficulties involved in the frustration of not seeing work turn out the way that I wanted, or seeing it, in fact, turn out the way that I wanted, but having nobody like it as much as I did. I spent at least 5 years and sustained effort being rejected. And so a lot of the work that I have done as a writer has been managing to deal with disappointments and rejections, and always trying to keep front and center in my head that I do this because I love it, and that all of those experiences can take that joy in the actual process away from you. And so you just have to be mindful of that. You have to ask yourself from time to time, am I still enjoying doing this? And if the answer is no, I hope that what you will not decide is, well, then I'm not going to do it anymore. I hope that instead you will decide, well, I have to figure out a way to get that joy back. And you will be imaginative and dogged in terms of protecting the thing that you love about doing this. If, for one example, if you are in a writing group and you always leave discouraged and in an unhappy place, then that's not a good writing group for you. That a good writing group makes you want to work on, even if they are blind to the perfections of the work that you have created, you still go away wanting to do it better, wanting to do it in the best possible way you can. I see that although I said I was starting with external issues, I have already drifted into internal issues, and I'm going to try something I feel I've had some only modest success with, which is a screen share. I want to put something up and hopefully let you all see it. And where is it? Give me a second, because I'm not finding what I wanted. Okay, it's on my screen now. How do I get it onto your screen? All right, there it is. I wish I had some way of knowing that you can see that. But I'm going to assume you can, and if you can't, I'm going to read it out loud, so maybe it won't matter so much. So this is a list. This is my personal list of the vast, if not infinite, territory of fears writers must face, whether before, during, or after the creative process. And as I said, this is a partial list. Fear of your own wish to be the best. Fear of making a fool of yourself. Fear of encountering your own psychic pain. Fear of your own inadequacy. Fear of harming people you love. This is a particular issue when you're writing memoir. Fear of the depth of your desire to succeed. Fear of wasting your time. Fear of being selfish or self-aggrandizing. Fear of finishing. Fear of never finishing. So these are, this is just the territory of being a writer. I'm going to stop sharing and come back on. And so, the best thing that I can say to you about that list of fears, all of which I share, all of which I have shared my entire writing career, which is stretching into the decades now, is just not to think of those things as unusual or personal to you or something that should not be happening, because this is the territory that you're in. This is these fears cannot be made to go away. They never will go away. So they must simply be acknowledged and then ignored. Just a kind of welcome them in, say, hello, old friend. This fear that what I have put on the page and tried to make beautiful is in fact unsightly and embarrassing. Just to say to that fear, kind of hello, old friend, and then ask it to go away while you work. Tell it you'll talk to it later, but right now you're busy. So again, just when these fears kind of arise and seem like they're going to overwhelm you, keep in mind that that's exactly what is supposed to be happening, and that you would probably be, I don't know, a person with whom I would not wish to have dinner if you did not feel those fears when you were writing. So again, just accept that that's what you've signed on for and go to work anyway. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of places in books where I ran aground and certain strategies that I used to try to move forward anyway. And then do another screen share in about a minute. So let's say that you're dealing with your fears, you've put them aside, you've managed your schedule so that you have time to write, and the problem is then not external to you and it's not internal to your personal makeup. It's actually on the page. There is a problem in the work itself that is preventing you from moving forward. Several years ago, I heard Jane Smiley give a craft talk, and somebody said to her, so there's just this scene I don't know how to write. I just don't know how to do it, and I can't force my way through it. And she, what I expected her to say, and what she delightfully did not say, was, well, just buckle up, this is the job, go through it, just get it done. And instead she said advice that I personally have found far more useful than that advice would have been, which is try to think of a way to write your piece where you don't have to write that scene. If you feel you just can't do it, then try to find a way around it. And I have found that, as I said, much more helpful. And I will give you an example out of a short story that I once wrote. What happened in the story was that it's a single mother with one child, and the child has just been caught shoplifting. So she's gotten a call from the store, and the police are there, and she has to go pick up, I think he's 10, her 10-year-old child who's been caught shoplifting. And uh, so she's obviously, she's very angry. She's very upset, and he's very sad and sorry to have been caught. And I kept trying to write the scene in which she goes and picks him up. They're in the car going home, and they're discussing it. They're having the conversation about how disappointed she is. And it's not that I couldn't write it; it's that I couldn't write it in a way that seemed to me at all interesting. That the conversation they had was just exactly the conversation you would expect a mother to have with her 10-year-old son under these circumstances. There was nothing surprising happening in it. There was nothing interesting happening in it. And yet it seemed real to me, and everything that I could think to do it in a different way did not seem to me like the conversation that would really happen. What I did, based partly on this idea that maybe you can find a way around things, is with some hand waving, persuasive or unpersuasive, you would have to be the judge. Instead of going home, they end up at a miniature golf course, playing a game of miniature golf. And so the entire talk that I was not enjoying writing was eliminated. They're in a public space. And what happens instead is that they are playing a furious game of miniature golf. But the mother is so angry that she kind of can't miss, and she is just sweeping her way through the miniature golf course. And the 10-year-old child is having much more trouble getting the ball in the hole, and very aware of how angry his mother is. He's the point of view character, incidentally. And I just like that so much better. I feel, that you can seldom go wrong setting a scene on a miniature golf course. There's so much to look at. There's so much to do. And so I was able to produce something that I thought was much more fun and much more interesting than the conversation and the confrontation that I had initially planned. So that's, one thing that I try when I've run aground, in terms of trying to find my way around something that I'm not enjoying doing, is, can I move it? Can I move it somewhere more interesting? Can I move it somewhere where the things that I am uninspired by happening would happen in a different way that I would find more interesting? Secondly, can I add something? And I will give you just an example of this from my third novel. I had created a character who, the novel takes place in 1890s San Francisco, and she's an upper class woman. She's a white woman, fairly wealthy, and she has attitudes towards. She has racial attitudes and religious attitudes that seem to me appropriate and authentic for the class of woman that she is and the time and place that she lives in, but they weren't attitudes that I cared for very much. And so the more I wrote about her, the more I disliked her. And I think your experience may be different, but I find it impossible to write a novel about a character that I am not liking. So I did an exercise in which I added something to her biography. And the way I often do this is that if I've got a character, usually an adult character, I go back to something in their childhood. I write a scene from their childhood in which they encounter a great emotion for the first time. How I came to this this strategy is a long story for another time when we have more time. But the great emotions being terror and joy and envy and fury. So I would write a scene from the character's childhood in which they encounter that emotion, assuming that I will be able to actually drop this scene into the work that I'm writing, that these are not just pages that I am doing as a kind of warm up or problem solving, but that I'm actually writing pages that will be in the novel. And in the case of this character, what I added was a younger brother who had died in infancy. She was initially an only child. She's still now an only child, but now she's an only child because her baby brother died when he was only a few days old. I put a child, I created a childhood in which she sleeps in a bed with his picture over it, because the Victorians in the 1890s appear to have been very fond of taking portraits of dead people. And so in her nursery, this portrait of this dead child is over her bed. And her mother has said to her when she was 6, which is how old she was when the baby died, that he will watch over you. And she thinks that this is a comforting thought, that she has put an angel in the nursery to protect the child, and that the child will hear it that way. But my character, as a young girl, hears only he will be watching you. And so she has spent her whole life felt that some presence is watching everything that she does. And she has carried that into adulthood. And it's a kind of terror to her that a creature that she thinks has every reason to be envious of her as maybe not such a benign presence is always there watching her. And that opened my sympathy up to this character again. I thought, well, that would be so hard, poor dear. And then I was able, having figured that out, having gone back and changed certain things about the way I was creating the character, it made me interested in her again and like her again. And I'm gonna, I see I'm running out of time. I'm gonna put up another screen share that I think will be too long for me to read all of it, but I will point out parts of it at least. I hit something wrong. All right. Where is it? Sorry, let me try one more time. I think this is it. Yes. All right. Now, this is something I can recommend just as great fun that you might do at some point, which is that I made a list of several years ago of my favorite things to read about and write about. And so another thing I can do when I run aground is to look back at this list and see if I can throw in any of the things that I really like reading and writing about into the work that I'm now doing. And I'll just point out a couple of them to you. I like birds, especially crows, pelicans, and jays. I'm very fond of rats. I've written multiple versions of the Pied Piper story over my life. I like the Brontes, anything about the Brontes. I like old television shows. I like world fairs. I like card games. I like maps. I like Cat in the Hat characters who bring chaos into the into the work. I like misunderstandings and mistranslations. I like frogs and toads. I like Civil War reenactors and ham radio operators and anybody who has a kind of obsession. Again, whether you actually use a list like that or not, they are great fun to write. And I highly recommend doing it. And for me, it's a source of inspiration, of comfort, that I can turn to and say, well, perhaps I'm having difficulty because there's no crow in this scene that I'm trying to write. Surely if I add a couple of crows, things will improve for me. Or what I need is a curiosity cabinet that has strange items on the shelves that I can refer to. if none of those things work, my final strategy is to go backwards instead of forwards. That sometimes I've made a decision that has led me into a kind of cul-de-sac where I can't get out, and then I have to look at the back of the pages that I've done. I kind of I'm very conscious when I'm writing of my energy level at all points. I feel, when things are going well, when I'm happy with what I'm doing, I feel good. And so I look through the manuscript and I try to find the last point at which I actually felt good. And I start again from that point, and I try to make a different decision, go in a different way, have a different vision for how the story might go next. I want to leave lots of time for questions. I was asked to leave lots of time for questions. So I've got one more screen share. And then I hope that you will have the nerve to ask me some questions. Screen share. This is the most important information, I feel, and it is not mine. It is from a writer named Ted Solitaire, who's written a wonderful piece called Writing in the Cold, the first 10 years. This is sort of all about writing before you get published or before you have any kind of affirmation, sort of the hardest time at which to keep going. And so I'm going to read some of this just because I feel it's important and encompasses the most important advice I have. So again, this is just an excerpt. For the inexperienced writer, a year or two of rejection or a major rejection can lead all too easily to self-distrust, and from there to a disabling distrust of the writing process itself. The writer who is suffering this distrust, whether temporarily or chronically or terminally, gives up her most fundamental and enabling right, the right to write uncertainly, roughly, even badly. The writer can't set her imagination free if she is worried about how comely her sentences are, how convincing her characters will be, how viable her plot. But the self-rejecting writer finds herself doing just that. Instead of going from task to task, she goes from creating to judging, from her mind to the typewriter to the wastebasket. In time, her mind becomes a ruthless system of self-cancellation. The longer this goes on, the more writing becomes an issue of entitlement and prohibition. That is, what the writer sets down or merely thinks about must be so promising that her right to write is suddenly allowed again. But even if she hits upon an exciting first sentence or paragraph or even a whole opening development, just as surely as night follows day, the dull stuff returns, her uncertainty follows, and soon she is back in court testifying against herself. To stay in this state too long is to reach the dead end of narcissistic despair known as writer's block, in which one's vanity and guilt have so persecuted one's craft and imagination, and so deprived them of their allies, heart, curiosity, will, that they have gone into exile. So that's kind of my final general point, is that writing something good involves a great deal of writing something bad. And that, again, like the fears that will never go away, that is never going to go away. And so the fact that what you have done in a day is all very, very bad is not at all a reflection on what the final work will be, on what your abilities are, on what your talents are, and on what you are able to achieve. So once again, it's just really a matter of understanding that that you can always make it better, and that everybody starts with a shitty first version of everything, and that making it better is the work of revision. It's the work of rethinking and reworking, And the fact that what you have on the page is an unsightly mess should in no way discourage you, because that unsightly mess is the necessary first step to writing something good. All right.
Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone is applauding. So this would be the normal, right, where we get. Um, yeah, no, that was great. I mean, we have a ton of questions already, and I
Oh,
mean,
good.
it definitely made me feel better about a lot of things. So let's just start with the questions as they came in. So we have, do you share drafts with others? So maybe we can even talk about like your seventh novel, right? Who do you share it to now that it's done? What happens now?
I do share it. It's as I think I said, out to my writing workshop right now, and they're going to tell me on Sunday what they think of it. But they have seen a lot of it going along. I shared it as I was working on it too. In general, I try to get things in pretty good shape before I share them. I think for some writers, it works well to have things less coherent and to get a lot of ideas from other people and to be able to pick and choose before the thing has solidified from other ideas. That does not work for me. I feel that if I am not clearer on what I want to accomplish, then I can't process the criticism I'm getting as whether it's getting me closer to what I want to accomplish or is actually on some tangent for some piece that someone else could be beautifully writing, but it's not the piece that I'm writing. So I do. I share all along the process. I share with many people. At various times, I've had multiple workshops that the advantage being that if one workshop does not recognize your genius and brilliance, you can just take it to another workshop where hopefully people will be smarter. But it doesn't work for everybody. As I said, if your experience listening to people respond is discouragement and a sort of loss of heart, then that is not for you. A good workshop should fill you with inspirational ideas that you can pick and choose from, and that you will feel excited about adopting. If that's not your experience, either don't workshop at all. You may be a writer for whom workshopping is never going to work, or get a different workshop where people are more supportive.
I think that's really great advice. I especially like the thing about knowing what your piece is before bringing it. I think that sounds great.
Knowing what you want.
Knowing what you want from it. Yeah, that's great. And speaking of which, there's a good one here. Two people have asked about outlining, so I'm just going to read both the questions. The one says, do you outline? If so, do you outline for everything, both novels and short stories? And what does the outline look like? Super vague or meticulously specific? And the other one is, do you work from an outline or just make it up as you go?
This is a question that I think I have answered erroneously for years, and I only quite recently realized that I've just been lying about this for years, which is because the outline is not a preliminary step for me. I always said I don't outline. I make it up as I go along. That is true. I make it up as I go along. As the further I get into a piece, and this is true for short stories as well as for novels, the clearer the progression on the page becomes in my mind. So it's usually when I start quite, formless, bodiless, pointless. When I was a student, if you had to turn in your outline with the paper, I would always write the paper, and then I would write the outline from the paper. And this is why my answer for years has been a lie, because I actually do outline. It's a very late stage step for me. I've written the book, and then I outline it, and I outline what I actually have. And then I look at the outline, which is a sort of very condensed version of what I've tried to do, and helps me try to see it as a whole, at a point where if it's a novel, it's too big for me to experience as a whole. It puts it in a place where I can sort of look at the movements of it and the pacing of it. So I do outline, but it's one of the very last things I do.
That's really interesting. So it's like an part of the editing process for you is going
Yes,
through the outline.
yes, yes.
We have you struggled with fear of success? And if so, how do you get over it?
Fear of success obviously is a very privileged position to find yourself in. Um, uh, I I do. I guess I feel that I can very easily lose track of this. That I can very easily be sort of knocked off my pins. But that in a general way, I know how good I am. And I know when I'm not being recognized for being as good as I am, but I also know when I'm being overly praised for being better than I am, that I have a sense of where I fall. And also, because so much of the negative criticism that my writing gets seems to me actually misguided, not all of it, but much of it. If I'm going to choose not to believe the negative stuff, I have to sort of also choose not to believe the positive stuff. That I have to give up the overpraising along with the underpraising. That I again, I've just turned in a novel, and I am remembering, for all I love writing, the sort of week of publication or the period just before publication is awful, because the reviews are going to start coming in, and you're going to begin to hear from unhappy readers, and you feel, you just feel like you've just painted a big target on your chest, and now people are aiming at it. And honestly, what did you suspect? What did you expect? And it's particularly, I have to say, it's particularly troubling to me in this time and place where it seems to me writers, particularly very successful writers, are being subjected to a kind of scrutiny that is painful for me to watch from the outside. That and a lot of it has to do with being successful. That you get to a certain point, and I am no exception to this. There are novels out in the world. I name no names, but there are novels that I know that I would have liked a lot better if they hadn't won the Pulitzer Prize. Somehow winning the Pulitzer Prize makes me pick them up thinking, well, okay, show me, show me how great you are. And then they don't. And then I think, well, I wouldn't have given that the Pulitzer Prize. And I know that, the author didn't ask for the Pulitzer Prize, and he's in no way to blame for having won the Pulitzer Prize. And yet it is impacting my reading of their novel in a completely unfair way. And I see a lot of that. So I am able to handle the attention that I do get. I would not want to be the author of American Dirt, to name one example. I think I would have a very, very hard time surviving that. So I want a certain amount of success, but yeah, there's a level. I don't want to be above that level.
No, yeah, I think that's a really interesting
prize. I am not taking it.
Yeah, that is a really interesting thing. The more someone praise is heaped on something, the more it's hard to like separate that from your enjoyment of the work. Would you say your feelings about your own placement and success and how good you are has changed over the years significantly? Is there points that's shifted where you wrote a novel and you're like, I'm much better than I was before? Like,
I do think that I have gotten better. I feel confident that I have gotten better, and that it's a strange thing to pair that confidence with a sense that in no way do I feel that I have figured it out. This is, I told you at the very beginning that one of the big surprises in my writing life was that how much attention I have to pay to emotional stability and maintenance throughout. The second biggest surprise to me was that it does not get easier. I think I've gotten better, but it has not gotten easier. I do not feel, when I sit down to write a novel, okay, I've done this 7 times. I know how to do this now. It always turns out that everything I learned on the last novel was very particular to that novel. And I'm seeing somebody saying, I don't think the problem with American Dirt is due to its success. I'm not going to argue with that point. I do think that people just wouldn't have noticed if it hadn't been successful. So it would have still had the problems. Absolutely.
But not the spotlight.
The spotlight.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah. So we have someone here who says, let's see, I don't actually get a name of it. It's Shirley, who says, I'm stalling on the ending of my novel. I am setting out various paths my protagonist might follow, and I'm finding drawbacks for me as a writer. How do I work myself out of this? Write each ending, or?
I would think that when you find the right ending, you will know it. So I would suspect that means that that you've not found the right ending yet. I guess I would keep thinking. Because I think when you find the right one, you'll be excited to do it. You'll be very excited with the idea that you're at the end. But you'll also be excited to write those pages.
I like that. In a related way, Catherine D has a question about the middle more. Can you speak a bit about running out of steam as you approach the middle/end?
Yeah, the middle is really difficult. I think usually by the time, and I do write my novels chronologically in the way the pages will appear, not necessarily chronologically in terms of the time sequence. But yeah, so by the time I'm approaching the end, I have kind of figured out what the ending will be in a more concrete and better way. But the middle is, I still have a lot of questions. There's still a lot of directions that things could go in. And also, I think, this is one of the reasons I like short stories is I like setting things up. I like ending things in short stories. That's pretty much it. You set it up and you end it. And the difference in the novel is that you've got this middle section in which somehow there should be momentum. Somehow there should be, propulsion for the reader. And yet I used to get in my editorial letter from my editor frequently, she would say there was a lot of to and froing in my novel, by which I took it to mean, people are doing things, people are rushing here, people are rushing there, things are happening, but there's no sense of a line pushing you forward in it. And, for my 6th novel, We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves, I simply wrote the middle. I started in the middle. Great strategy. I don't think I can do it with every novel, but boy, did that work. Just get the middle out of the way. And then all you've got to do is the beginning and the ending. And those are the parts I like. So, they're just, you have to find some sort of through line that keeps the writer, keeps the reader engaged, and also a feeling of things intensifying in some way. And I find that very difficult. My friend, the writer Sean Stewart, was talking once in my presence about the difficulty of writing action scenes. And he was talking about sword fights in particular, or that was the example he was using, that in a movie you can make a sword fight really interesting just with the blocking, and somebody is pushed back and then they're coming forward again. But in a book, that sort of parry thrust is not really very compelling prose. And so he was using as his example the sword fight towards the end of The Princess Bride, where the character keeps saying, my name is, what is my name? My name is
Inigo Montoya.
Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. And he just says it over and over again as he gains in confidence, and that's what the middle of your book needs, something like that where uh, some mechanism through which you intensify the actions so that it's not just people doing things, but it has the sense of movement towards something.
That's
I
really good.
think, but yeah, the middle is a problem. Another problem I have not actually solved.
When you start, do you know it's going to be a novel or short story?
I have come to know that
Okay.
early in my career, when I had not written a novel yet. I had sat down several times to write a novel, thinking, "Here I go. Here is my novel." Now, only to find 14 pages later that I had said everything I have to say, and that it was in fact a short story. But now I do know, and it's mostly, mostly for me, a novel is just lots of short stories
In thing.
put together in a hopefully pleasing sort of structure. So, in order to write a novel, I have to have many short stories in my head that will make up the novel.
We have a couple about revision in chat. Ben asked, please talk at length about revision for the novel. And then we also have a follow-up on outlining, which I think will pair in. So if you don't initially outline, how in the world are you able to maintain pace, arc, narrative thread, etc.? If I start writing, it would lead nowhere. So I guess just pairing those in, since outlining is part of your revision as well.
Well, first of all, who said I maintain arc structure? I told you that it's all very shitty at the beginning. But there is, there is, well, let me say this, that of the 6 novels I've published, 3 of them I went in, I did not have an outline, but I had a structure in my head. And 3 of them I did not. I I think of the 3 that I did not as sort of real novels, because they, it's a story that takes as many pages as a novel to tell. The ones that I've done with where I had a structure in mind, the novel is broken into sort of discrete bits. And that is a much more pleasant writing experience for me. This is another point I should have maybe talked about in terms of problem solving and keeping going, is that sometimes you just need to scale down the problem that is facing you today. So you don't think in terms of the book, you think in terms of the scene. Or you don't think in terms of the scene, you think in terms of the paragraph. Um, you cut your problem to some sort of manageable size, and that, for me, that's what a structure does. So, the most easy example that I can give you from my own work is the Jane Austen Book Club, which is, I got the idea. I was at a bookstore. I saw a sign on the wall that said the Jane Austen Book Club. I thought it was a book. I realized it wasn't. I was living in Davis. The bookstore is Book Passage in Corte Madero, so I had a long drive home. And when I got in the car, I knew I was going to write a book called the Jane Austen Book Club. I didn't know anything else. But as I passed over the Richmond Bridge, the entire structure of the book fell into my mind. It would be a book club with 6 people. There would be 6 months in which they met. Each month they would meet at a different person's home, and each month we would concentrate the book on that character who was hosting. There are the big 6 novels of Jane Austen. She wrote other things, but the 6 big ones. So I knew I would divide the book into 6 sections. We would look at 6 people. We would look at 6 novels. And it's not exactly an outline, but it gave me a lot to go on. The other ones in which I had a structure in place first were my first novel, Sarah Canary, and my last novel, We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves. So
Did
I have just found that I'm happier going in with something rather than going in with nothing, which is not, again, not the same as having an outline, but is also not the same as having nothing planned or nothing in your head.
do you find those have taken less revision the ones with the plan in your head, or is that not?
Yes, and for better or for worse, those are my three most successful novels. The others, the real novels, they don't seem to work as well for anybody. Maybe it's my, my frustration in trying to write them that comes through on the page in some way that is contagious. But I have learned, 6 novels in, that I'm happier if I have some sort of structure in head. Talk at length about the revision for the novel.
Yeah,
That's first of all, my particular method of writing is that it is not one I recommend at all, but it is my own, and I revise continually. I like rewriting. I do not like the shitty first draft. So again, in the spirit of making my problems a manageable size, I write a paragraph when I start, and then I rewrite that paragraph, and then I rewrite that paragraph, and then I rewrite that paragraph, and then I write another paragraph, and then I rewrite those 2 paragraphs. And it's a very slow way to move through an entire novel, but it keeps me happy because I spend more time writing things that I like than I spend writing the things that I don't like, which is the first stuff. And it feels pretty solid to me as I move along. So that by the time I get to the end of a novel, I have rewritten the previous pages more times than I can count. This is, as I said, this is a slow method. It makes me happy, so I'm not adjusting it for something more efficient, but it has significant inefficiencies. Sometimes I get to the end of a novel and I realize that the first 50 pages, now that I know where it ends, that's not where it begins. And so 50 pages that I maybe spend a year, tuning up like a fine violin, just have to be dumped now because they don't fit towards the ending that I have. And I think in general, this is absolutely true. I have complete confidence saying this about short stories. Mostly true for me with novels too, that you don't really know where something ought to begin until you've written the ending. And so when I do get to the end of that initial piece, as I said, I've already done a great deal of rewriting, but I also, the rewriting I do at that point, I do thinking very significantly about the ending and how I can, how the ending ought to work, how it ought to land, and how I can revise the initial pages so that the ending is both surprising and moving and anything else I can manage.
I think that's really, I mean, that's great that that process works for you. I think it's interesting to hear all the different ways people go about this.
I do think that whatever way you stumble into is your method, and that you shouldn't listen to anybody who tells you to do it differently because you won't be happy. You won't be happy using someone else's method, I think. If I've got no objection to you outlining. If that works for you, absolutely be my guest. Many writers whose work I love do very careful outlines first, and
yeah,
for
that's
me,
actually
a lot of the joy is in the problem solving, and so if I solve all the problems in the outline, I'm not interested in actually writing the book.
that makes total sense. Yeah. Speaking of people you enjoy, the final question from Bookshop Santa Cruz event. They would love to know what you've been reading and enjoying lately.
This is always a tricky question for me,
Right?
because so much of what I read is I'm reading it to see if I want to blurb it or not. So it's books that are not actually out yet. And so I can tell you with great excitement what I've loved, but you cannot go and get it. But I've done a couple of events now with Gail Tsukiyama, and she has a book out called The Color of Air, which I just think is really wonderful. She's got she's got just a beautiful prose style, and for me, she feels like she's honest and clear-sighted about human nature, but also generous. So that I feel better about people in general when I read Gail's books. Um,
I,
and I also have really liked Meg Waite Clayton's The Last Train to London, which is a World War II novel, which is, has a lot of very painful World War II type stuff in, but it's about a Dutch woman who created the kinder train to get Jewish children out of Austria. And so it's also, a very inspiring story of one person making an enormous difference in the world.
I think those are both great recommendations, especially now. Anything that can give some faith in
Yeah,
humanity would be great.
yeah, that would
So,
be great.
thank you very much, Karen. You were amazing, and your talk was great. Remember, everyone, down at the bottom, there's the Buy Her Books button. You will get signed copies of the books we have for purchase there. We have events later today and tomorrow, so make sure to sign up for those as well.
Right.
All right.
And just don't give up.
Just keep writing.
You are entitled to your dreams.
Thank you very much. Bye, Karen.